Welcome to the Fantasy Football Healers program. I'm your host, Dustin Brown, and with me today is co-host Colten Palmer. We're Dr. House and Dr. Foreman, saving not only lives, but also saving your Dynasty leagues. Welcome in.
Welcome in, y'all. Here we are in the dead of the off season again, still just grinding it out, trying to make every day of Dynasty better.
This has been quite a grinding week. We had the Senior Bowl, we had the Shrine Bowl. You know, you were at it looking at footage and videos of all these players. Tell us a little bit about your process.
First, I like to break down every single rookie that I evaluate. And I like to at least watch 5 games. And what I do is I go into the footage that just shows what that player is doing specifically. Sometimes it's all 22, sometimes it's cut up. But my very first game I watch of them, I do absolutely nothing but just kind of take in everything that they do. And then after I get my first game down and, after watching them, that's when I'll really start kind of try to process, get more into depth. How's their footwork? How's their accuracy? How's their vision? How are they reading the defense? And I really like to get into at least 5 games per player. Sometimes when I get a little more excited, I'll go beyond 5 just to keep digging. But I mean, at the minimum, I like to really get in about 5 games per player. And I try to do this latest season. Sometimes I'll break into like their older seasons, if they got injured late or if they kind of struggled towards the end, kind of see what their other seasons were like to dig into. But, breaking down all of that and just kind of see how they do all that is really the way I like to get in and evaluate. And I'm more of a visual person. I love the stats. Don't get me wrong. I like the stats, but I really like to be able to just watch the player. And that's where I get excited and is doing the video footage because I like to be able to see what they're doing and, and see the team that they're facing in the video as well. Because the stats, you can blow those up against bad teams where you can see these stat numbers and you're like, wow, this is incredible. But, they're playing some no-name team from Maine, So it's like, what's going on here actually, where if you got the video footage in front of you, you can see that defense is bad and they're just beating the crap out of them. So that's where I like to use the video footage and really break down the player and kind of see how they do against good teams and bad teams.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. You can't just watch the highlight reels because they're only going to be showing the good with the player. You got to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's a little bit of my concern with Gentry. You said about like the competition that he's going up against, with being from Boise State, with him being the top of the class. I think there's got to be at least a little bit of concern about like the defenses that he was actually going up against. And we can talk about that in a later show, especially when we start talking about like the 101s and start talking a little bit more specifically about the rookie drafts. But today's not about that. Today, we're going to be talking about some of these rookie players. Again, I'm going to be touching on some of the Senior Bowl stuff. But before we do that, we need to get into the news. There still was a little bit more development in regards to some of the coaching staff changes and offensive coordinators. So with that, let's go on to the news. Seahawks have hired Clint Kubiak at offensive coordinator. Now, Colten, I know you were really concerned about who the next offensive coordinator is going to be for the Seahawks. Just if we look back this past year, Clint Kubiak was with the Saints. And when he finally took over the offense, they scored 91 points in just a 2-week sample size at the beginning of the season. And they looked like they were going to be a dominant team before all the injuries started to pile up. And so now he's going to be with the Seahawks. And, I love this for JSN. I love it for Walker. But rumors have it that Metcalf may also be on the move to potentially the Raiders and Pete Carroll.
Yeah, the Clint Kubiak hiring gets me excited for some assets in Seattle there. We saw that the Saints offense was able to beat up on some teams there early on in the season. Now, we did find out later down the road these were kind of bad defenses. They were defense we thought were going to be good.
Yeah, you're right.
Turned out to be bad. But I mean, the utilization in the running back field, like they utilize the crap out of Alvin Kamara. So, that gets me excited, especially for the run game there in Seattle. And it's like what the head coach wanted, McDonald. He wanted to establish a run game, which is kind of why Ryan Grubb was out. He really wanted the run game to get going. And the fact that Grubb didn't do that, and I think that's what led up to his downfall, is they really want to get this run game going. And I think Clint Kubiak has a very good possibility to get the run game going and then get some good quick passes out to JSN. So gets me excited for this Seattle offense. I think we're going to see more of a committee, though. When it comes to Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, I think it's going to be a bit of a 1-2 punch now. Charbonnet has continued to show that he is reliable with Charbonnet or with Walker being out, and Walker's body just cannot withstand the workload that they were trying to give him. I mean, he's been injured year in, year out, and so I think they're going to try to take some of that pressure off of him in order to kind of preserve his longevity. I mean, he is the more explosive back, but man, he just can't stay healthy. So, ups and downs to that, but I think it's going to save Walker enough to where I'm still excited to have him on the team. I'm excited to finally have Charbonnet on my team. So just exciting things going on there in Seattle. It'll just be kind of interesting to see what we do at quarterback now.
So even with like Kubiak and you said about weak defenses, like it was still one of the most explosive in the NFL history in the 2-week sample size. You brought up a good point in regards to Walker and Charbonnet. I think it's definitely going to be a split backfield. And my concern is what if they add another running back in this draft class to this 2 running back committee to make it a 3-headed monster?
I think they've got too many problems in other places, especially with the possibility of Metcalf moving on. They're going to need to try to find like a 1-2 punch for JSN, because there's words that Lockett could be moving on. They can save a little money from Lockett, and he's getting older. So if they lose both Metcalf and Lockett, I mean, we're looking at them trying to replace a wide receiver or a couple of wide receiver positions there.
Yeah.
So I think there's bigger fish in the sea to try to knock out with that one. So I'm not concerned about any running backs being added in this one. They've got 2 great running backs that they can utilize.
Very good. Oh, and then let's not forget about Kenny McIntosh. He looked like he was playing pretty decent there at the end of the season too, and so that might actually be a meat shield for them adding another running back to this backfield. The Bears, they've hired Dennis Allen, defensive coordinator. Any chances they trade for Kendre Miller?
Oh, they have to. It's his favorite player. I just
only to put him on the IR.
Dennis Allen is my mortal enemy, man. I'm still. Oh man, yeah, they're gonna hire Kendre Miller, or he's gonna find his new hated player.
Well, he's going to be sticking on the defensive side, so he doesn't have to worry about the offense. Dennis Allen, he's probably a really good defensive coordinator, but he just wasn't that great at being a head coach. We talked about that just last time about these coaches just keep going up the ladder until they find out maybe a head coaching position isn't the most appropriate spot for him, and then they come back down to their coordinating position, and that's really where that they feast and they famine. So do they swim or do they sink? And I think Dennis Allen, he's going to swim with the defense. The Bears defense has been playing really good over the last 2 years, and they're only going to add to this defense in the offseason. The Lions have hired the Broncos passing coach Johnny Morton as the offensive coordinator. I know nothing about Johnny Morton other than Morton is a good town to live in.
Morton's a great town. I've come to like it. I mean, it is a weird cult following, but I've come to like it. But he was on the Lions actually for a little bit. He was with that their franchise. So they know quite a bit about him, and they are taking their shot on somebody that they know. So I don't mind the hiring. I mean, yeah, like I said, I agree with you. I don't know much about him, but they do. So I kind of trust them in their process as of right now. There's no reason to question the Lions. They were able to turn it around. So hopefully they made the right hire here and can continue on this high-powered offense.
Yeah, 2 more coaching updates, and then there's just a couple player things. Josh Grizzard is the offensive coordinator now for the Bucs. He was more of an internal promotion, and we just got word that Baker Mayfield apparently didn't really care much for the offensive coordinating from William Cohen. Thank you.
Liam Cohen, yeah. The new head coach of the
Jaguars.
Jags. Duval. Have you seen that video yet?
Oh,
Oh man, you have got to look up this video of Liam Cohen saying Duval. It is the cringiest thing. Oh, it is so funny. He's just like he is a dweeb. And it's so funny. He's just like Duval. I have watched it so many times. It makes me laugh every single time. Yeah, internal hire though. Baker was also like interviewed by people asking if he's got hard feelings, and Baker's really grown up over the years here, and he was just like, I don't blame the guy. You got to do what's best for your family. You got to take a shot on that. I can't be mad at him or resent him for it. He's like, he's got kids and he's got a family to raise, so he's got to do what's best from him, and it just showed a lot of maturity out of Baker Mayfield there. Regarding his offensive coordinator, Baker's on 8 for 8 now, so he's used to getting this offense changed up and swapped out. So it's nothing new to Baker, and I think he'll adjust just fine. And maybe we see some different utilization out of our backfield. Maybe some Rashad White stocks are going to be taking a hit, but I think overall, we're going to be. I think we're going to be just happy with the Bucs offense still.
and Brian Dable of the Giants is to give up the offensive play calling duties to offensive coordinator Mike Kafka. Coach for the Senior Bowl for the national team. There was some steam getting gained about potentially Mike Kafka getting added to be the head coach for the Saints, but now I'm hearing about Kellen Moore now being the front runner for the Saints. That clip with Kafka was from the movie Congo. Did you ever see the movie Congo?
Not.
Cult classic from the 90s.
Yeah, it sounds like McCarthy is out, and everything from that Saints job. So sounds like Kellen Moore's the front runner, and they're just waiting for the Super Bowl to be over and everything, so they can make that locked in. But we'll see. We'll see how Kellen Moore does for a second go round.
Did you see that Will Shipley scored a garbage time touchdown this past weekend?
Oh yeah, his slow butt just couldn't pull away. Oh my gosh. He had a wide open run, and then it just looked like someone just like slammed on the brakes because he just it was a great run though. I mean, we texted each other right away.
Will Shipley!
Shipley.
Yeah, what could have been, I think, for Will Shipley. I don't know why he hasn't gained any traction. He only has like one of the best, maybe the best running back in the NFL in front of him.
Only it's kind of hard to displace Saquon Barkley.
Eric All, the Bengals, is said to potentially need a second surgery for his ACL. He had a really severe ACL tear early in November, and it's not looking good for him for the 2025 season. There's a strong likelihood that he's going to miss.
Yeah, it is most likely now that Eric All will be out for all of 2025. So look for him on those waiver wires.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be getting dropped in a lot of leagues. Matthew Stafford plans to return in 2025. Boy, that didn't take long for him to decide whether he's going to retire or stick around with the team.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think he's going to be one of those quarterbacks that, retires and comes back, retires and comes back, because he just can't give it up. He just can't. I think it's the best call. I think him and Sean McVay will come back and have another good season, but I foresee Matt Stafford, just finishing out as, an okay quarterback from here on out. He's starting to get up there in age, and he's starting to show it on the field. He's not as mobile. He's taking those hits, and it takes him a minute to get up. And, eventually one of these hits is going to be his last, and he's just going to say, you know what, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. But it's definitely, I expected him to come back one more season to give it another shot, but I think either this year or next year is going to be his last. So.
Well, he's currently signed for 2 more years with the Rams, and I suspect they're going to have to do some changing in regards to what he's getting reimbursed in order to make things happen for this year and next year. I suspect a lot of it's going to be getting put into like bonuses and things like that. So then that way he can still make the same amount of money, but they can play around with the salary cap a little bit more here in the offseason, especially with free agency looming.
Yeah. it'll be interesting to see how he can still function on that offense.
Yep. And then lastly, I just thought it was interesting that Jameis Winston is going to be a Super Bowl correspondent.
I don't even know what that is.
I suspect, well, a correspondent means like he's probably going to be on the field, like talking or communicating with some of the other staff during the game.
Nice.
Maybe he'll be doing interviews.
I was gonna say, if we could get some commentary on Jameis Winston, I would watch it over and over. I love that, man. It would be the best thing ever.
Yeah, and the Browns completely screwed the pooch with him, so I still look at him potentially getting a starting role somewhere.
Either a starting role, but he showed enough that, I mean, he's a capable backup. He should at least be in a backup role at the bare minimum.
Or, let's say the Raiders get Shadur or one of these other rookies that they may or may not, think that they have something in them. Why not put Winston in front of them?
Yeah, give him a little meat shield and someone to learn behind, and especially someone that is not afraid to throw the ball either, that's still able to get you some wins and still able to bring excitement to your franchise. I mean, that's one of the big things about Jameis. He goes in there as the backup and he just brings excitement to the game and to your fans and everything. Some of these teams you're like, oh, well, we're losing, we're going to put in the backup, and everybody loses interest and they stop paying money to these teams because it's like, oh, who cares? They're trying to lose. Who cares? This team is bad now. Jameis just brings excitement to the game and he brings energy and he just makes it fun, honestly.
And then now I'm going into some of the Senior Bowl stuff here, and as we go along, we talk about some of these players. Colten, if you've done any video analysis or have any other comments, I'd like you to kind of basically share and provide a little bit more detail and more insight on some of these players. But first, I got to start with, like, for the Senior Bowl, the defensive line is unbelievable in this coming class. The offensive line during the Senior Bowl practices, during the game, made it really challenging to really get a full evaluation on some of the running backs and some of the quarterbacks, because the quarterbacks had zero time to throw the ball, and the running backs were getting hit well beyond the line of scrimmage because it was just so leaky.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a strong defensive class, and it's also going to be a weaker quarterback class when we get to that.
So it seems like the NFL is really interested in speed now, and we definitely see that with Miami and some of the other teams, like even the Kansas City Chiefs are starting to go with Worthy with the best 40 time in NFL history at the combine. So I thought it'd be interesting to just start with a few stat lines of speed. And so, who is the fastest? And this is at the Senior Bowl. Kyle Williams, wide receiver from Washington State. He ran 21.36 miles per hour. Tez Johnson, wide receiver of Oregon, at 20.64 miles per hour. Trevor Etienne, running back, brother to Travis Etienne out of Georgia, 20.18 miles per hour. Arian Smith, wide receiver of Georgia, 20.08 miles per hour. RJ Harvey, running back of UCF, 20 miles an hour. And then the Miami tight end, Elijah Araujo, was the fastest tight end on the Senior Bowl at 19.23 miles per hour. So there was some speed.
Definitely some speed, and it's interesting to see a tight end up there, kind of sitting there at the top. And I mean, I've got 3 quarterbacks that I have finished in my evaluation, being Cam Ward being one. And I mean, I saw that tight end pop up quite a bit in his passes. So I'll be interested when I get into the tight ends to really break down his film.
Well, we're going to start at the top with the tight ends. We're going to go into running back, then wide receiver, and then the quarterbacks. Because again, I think the quarterbacks, especially in this class, are on the bottom tier, bottom level. So I wanted to start with the top with some tight ends. And let's start with Elijah Rojo, the Miami tight end. 6'4", 245 pounds. He's going to be 22 when the season starts. He looks like he's a good route runner. He had quick speed. Again, he had that 19.23 miles per hour And this past year, he had 35 receptions for 570 yards and 7 touchdowns. So not a lot of receptions, but boy, can he do a lot when he has the ball in his hands. And I think a lot of teams are going to like that. He was the 49th top player in the draft per Daniel Jeremiah. And he's a smooth, again, a good route runner. He looked like he was a big playmaker for Washington State. He can be an inline tight end. He can play the slot. He can go out. He can play anywhere on the field. So there's a lot of excitement growing with Elijah Rojo out of Miami.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially, I'm a big person on the athletic tight ends. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. I mean, we saw Jelani Woods. So sad.
Not dead yet.
Extremely athletic, but sometimes they work out, but other times they work great. And you're looking for that athleticism in a tight end. And this is a guy in our drafts that he doesn't have all the buzz in the world yet. We'll see as the offseason goes on here how much buzz he gets, but probably a tight end you can snag in the third, maybe even later, depending on how much hype and buzz he gets. Just taking a shot on these athletic tight ends late in your drafts is kind of where it's at.
He'll be a guy I'll definitely want to track come combine season and see, how much burst does he have? How much agility does he have? What's his catch radius? Those sort of things. And so I think his arrow is definitely pointing up, and he's a name to know. There were 2 other tight ends that of note in the Senior Bowl, one of which was Mason Taylor out of LSU. He's 6'5", 256 pounds. That's more of a size that I'm really looking for in a tight end. I liked Rojo's size too at the 6'4", but the 245. If he could gain another 10 pounds, I think that'd be fantastic. But Mason Taylor, he made some tough catches, one of which was like a one-handed catch. He appeared to move well. There was a segment with his dad, Jason Taylor, who spoke very highly of him, obviously. Strong vice hands. And then, again, he's another guy that could be an every down tight end, and he can block and he can catch. And so those are the tight ends that I'm looking for. I want a tight end that is going to be on the field all the time and has the chance at any point to make a play.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen those tight ends like make a splash even on the tight ends that are the more athletic and gifted with, catching and yards after catch, and Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox is a blocker, and he's on the field more because he's able to block and then sees when these quarterbacks in trouble and is able to leak out and be that safety valve. Well, if you're not a blocking tight end and be able to be on the field, you're not going to get those opportunities as much as is kind of what we're seeing happen there. Being able to do both is extremely important.
And also having good hands, unlike Kincaid, also helps.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not talking to you anymore.
Flipped that one in there. What could have been for the Buffalo Bills? Harold Fannin Jr. with tight end, Bowling Green, 6'4", 230 pounds. I really didn't see him on the practice field all that much. From what I heard, he looked good, but again, this is a guy that's more of like a move tight end body, and just because of that and his size, that just has him a little bit lower than maybe these other 2 guys that I had a little bit more footage and a little bit more information from, with that Mason Taylor and Elijah Rojo.
Yeah, he's one of the top names that I'm hearing thrown around as one of the favorite tight ends. So it'll be interesting.
Top 3 in a lot of odds.
Yeah. So when I get to the tight ends video footage, it'll be interesting to see what he did during the regular season versus this Senior Bowl here.
Now I'm going into running back, and again, I've got running back was really kind of hard to decipher again with the leaky offensive line, but I do have a little bit of news and notes on a few of these guys. But I wanted to start first with when I'm watching the practices for the Senior Bowl. I was watching like 2 different elements. One was with Mel Kiper and his team, and another one was with Field Yates. And so I just wanted to start with Field Yates had his top 5, his early top 5 running backs. And I just wanted to go through them first before I talked about some of these running backs, because I just think it's interesting to know, like, where are some of these other guys that are kind of like, where are they positioned in this class as of right now to some of the experts. So Field Yates, top 5, he had obviously Gentry at number 1. Caleb Johnson was his number 2. Hampton, number 3. Travion Henderson number 4, and then Trevor Etienne. And what's your first thoughts on those 5 names?
I mean, those are kind of the 5 names we're hearing thrown around a lot anyways. It's definitely, dependent on who you're listening to, who's their favorite once it kind of gets more towards the bottom there. But those are a lot of the top 5 names that we're kind of hearing over and over again.
I think there's been a whole lot of information out there about Trevor Etienne. I feel like he's been a name that's not on a lot of people's top 5.
He's definitely one that kind of slips more into that top 5 position. You're going to see some variability once we get to those, 5, 6, 7 area. But I have heard a lot of people that were big on Trevor Etienne. I mean, just the fact that he has the pedigree. I mean, Travis Etienne is kind of a joke right now after this season because he had some struggles. But we did see him be very good at one point, and he was a first-round draft pick. So he's got the pedigree there. So there's a lot of people that are still big on him just because of that. And I mean, coming out of Georgia, I mean, the SEC's no laughing stock, and I mean, he was able to function there. So.
Yep. And then even when he was with Florida, he had over 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns when he was at Florida. Again, he was one of the faster players that was there, one of the fastest running backs that was there at the Senior Bowl, 20.18 miles per hour. He looked like he was a great receiver. He looked a little bigger than A-Chain. But it's really unsure, like, is he going to be a 3-down back? And I don't know. I don't think he has a body type to be like a 3-down back, but could he be like a James Cook type of player? I think that's in his realm, and he showed a lot of burst.
Yeah, I'm starting to, and this needs to be, kind of a more normal standard anymore, is I'm starting to try to not find these guys that can be 3-down backs because it is starting to become more and more rare. I mean, you're going to have your outliers. You're going to have, Jonathan Taylor. You're going to have Saquon Barkley, like the guys that get all the workload because they just want to give the ball to their playmakers. But we're starting to see more committees. We're starting to see that. And in these committees, I think you're going to want the more explosive one, the one that can pop off for big yardage. Those are going to be the guys that, sure, they might be a little more volatile, but at the same time, you want that explosion. And at any point they touch the ball, it can go for 40 to 60 yards. So looking for guys that have that speed, but not quite the size. I mean, that's kind of what we're going to have to start getting used to a little bit more. I mean, if you can find that 3-down guy that's going to be a stud, absolutely, you got to take your shot on that every time. But don't stray away from someone just because they may not be a 3-down back.
That's something I've definitely learned over the last 2 years. Maybe get that running back that's starting to slip because it could turn into an A-Chain. Remember when A-Chain, like, people were a little bit afraid to like draft him, and then once you drafted him, like, boy, did he explode.
Yeah, I mean, he was falling to the late first to early second in single quarterback leagues. I mean, I don't even know what he was going in Superflex. I wasn't playing Superflex actually yet. So I'm not. I'm just going to say probably a mid-second that year. So I mean, straying away and being afraid of these guys that are a little undersized but explosive. Sometimes you just got to shoot your shot on the guys you like, even if they're not seen as they're not going to have enough opportunity. They still can take that thing for big yardage whenever they touch it.
Brashard Smith out of SMU, he started to show pretty well there with the Senior Bowl during practices. He's he's converted from a wide receiver position to the running back position. We saw that with Antonio Gibson and Tyrone Tracy, and a lot of people are kind of comping him to that. Obviously, he excels at the pass catching ability. I did notice in the Senior Bowl, he did play special teams, and he had a huge kick return of 39 yards in the Senior Bowl game, which makes him even more valuable. Can he play the wide receiver position? Can he play the running back position? Can he play special teams? He's going to be kind of a jack of trades type of player that is going to be very valuable for a lot of these NFL teams.
Yeah, hearing that, I play in a couple leagues that we count kick return and punt return yardage for points. I mean, it's a fun way to spice up the league just to keep it interesting. And I mean, guys like that are almost cheat codes. So it's the fact that, they may not get a whole lot on every kick return, but 10 yards here, 10 yards there. I mean, it's pretty awesome. And, I know a lot of people that play in my leagues like that do enjoy it. So if you're looking for a new style of league to play in, absolutely think about doing that because it is fun. But those guys are absolute cheat codes.
That also tells me that the coaches are wanting to put the ball in this guy's hands. If they're going to be putting him back there to do like punt returns, kick returns, be an offensive weapon, like this guy's a playmaker. RJ Harvey, UCF, he showed that he was very explosive. He was second only to Kevin Smith of all-time rushing yards. Chris Johnson, Matt Forte is some of the comps that I'm hearing, which is excellent. Nice footwork to get open on like out routes. He did run 20 miles an hour. And during the Senior Bowl game, he even threw a touchdown to Tay Felton, wide receiver in the Senior Bowl. So another guy that could be a huge value for these NFL teams.
Yeah, and they say when they do it in the Senior Bowl is one of the big indicators on if they can make it in the NFL. So they say a lot of the time, if they excel at the Senior Bowl, just keep an eye on them. I mean, and keep following them throughout the offseason because that's a big indicator. I mean, we saw Terry McLaurin dominate the Senior Bowl, and look what he did. He came out and he dominated in the NFL. So just keeping an eye out for these guys and following them along as we go through this offseason is a good idea.
So there was one other running back that threw a touchdown pass in the Senior Bowl game. And now that I'm thinking about it, you've got two running backs that scored 2 touchdowns via pass. What does that tell you about the quarterback position? So Ollie Gordon, the second, he also had thrown a pass to Jaden Higgins of Iowa State in the Senior Bowl game for a touchdown. And, during the practices, I really didn't personally see a whole lot out of practice, but it sounded like he had a good Senior Bowl week for many of the pods that I listened to. He's a big boy. He's a young back, around 233 pounds. And I've heard comps of Braylon Allen and Najee Harris. And, it wasn't that long ago when Najee Harris was drafted in the first round with another running back in Trevor Etienne. We have an Etienne in this draft class as well. So is Ollie Gordon and Etienne also going to get drafted in the first round?
It's rare to see any more NFL teams draft in the first round, a running back, that is. It's like super rare. I mean, it's got to be a one in a kind running back in order for them to kind of reach like that. Maybe both of them in the second, because there are a lot of running back needy teams, but it would just be insane to see multiple running backs because Ashton Genty is going above them. There's quite a few other names that are going above these guys. So that would be, we're looking at 5 or 6 first round running backs. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, well, I want to be one of the first people to say this. I think this class reminds me a lot of the 2018 draft class when Saquon Barkley was drafted at number 2 overall. And I could see Genty maybe not getting drafted at number 2 overall, but definitely getting drafted top 10. And then you had another 5 running backs after him that ended up getting drafted that were very exciting running backs that we talked about for years in Dynasty. And some of those guys are still in the league, but that's for another day, Colton.
Absolutely.
I got two more running backs, and then we'll start filtering down into the wide receivers. Woody Marks out of South Carolina, running back. He was a good separator. Again, another guy that had kind of an Antonio Gibson kind of play style. He was the best offensive player for his team. He was a good receiver, best career receiver on the national team, except for that Tez Johnson. Do you know that Woody's not his real name?
Is it Buzz?
No, but you're along the same lines of how he got his name. His first name's actually Jaquarius Marks, Jaquarius. And he got the name Woody because he had loved wearing this Woody costume when he was a boy. And so he would wear the Woody costume everywhere that he went. And then the name just stuck.
Wild.
Yeah, they showed a picture of him during one of the Senior Bowl practices dressed up as Woody.
Nice.
I think it's just a fun story.
Big Toy Story fan.
Yep. To infinity and beyond. Marcus Yarns is the last running back that I keep hearing a lot of buzz about. Delaware running back, good route runner, came from a small school, supposedly better than Dylan Labe. And Dylan Labe had a lot of buzz coming out of the Senior Bowl just last year. They kept saying he was going to be the best. He was the best receiver out there, including all the wide receivers, all the running backs, and he's done nothing in the NFL. So I don't know what to make of that. information. But I've also heard a comp of Theo Riddick. And, Theo Riddick, he's made some splash plays in the NFL, but this is not a guy that I'm going to be going out of my way to draft in my rookie drafts.
Haven't even heard his name yet. So that was the first time I've heard his name even. So, I mean, this is a guy that you're probably going to throw maybe a fourth or even snag off the waiver wire.
Waiver wire.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan Laube, you were able to get either late third or fourth even. And yeah, we saw him make zero splash in the NFL. I mean, it was nothing.
It saddens me.
And there was even opportunity for him at the end of the year with all the injuries, and he just couldn't do anything. So maybe
he fumbled earlier in the year, and the coach just never gave him the opportunity again. It was like one and done. It was like old school Bill Belichick, vanish, gone.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't get to see all the behind the scenes stuff. Maybe there was some issues in practices and everything prior to that, but yeah. I mean, it's just someone to keep an eye on once again. But with a comp like Dylan Laube, makes you nervous.
Or Theo Riddick.
Or that too.
But he stuck around in the NFL. I mean, he's going to be helpful probably more for the NFL team, more so than he's going to be helpful in your dynasty leagues.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be jumping into some of the wide receivers. Some of the wide receivers were fairly interesting, while there was others that were less interesting. And again, I think that just falls back on the quarterbacks and how well the defense is in this coming draft. Kyle Williams, wide receiver out of Washington State, he recorded the fastest speed among the national team offense at the Senior Bowl at 21.36 miles per hour, as we touched on a moment ago. He was winning off the line of scrimmage. He showed a lot of quickness, good transitions, and a lot of burst through his routes. So, again, he'll be another one that I'll be looking specifically at come combine season.
Yeah, you're going to be talking about a lot of wide receivers I haven't broken into yet. So, especially those speedy ones, though, are definitely the ones you want to keep an eye on. Like you talked about earlier, speed is the key here in today's NFL, and they're really starting to figure that out.
So, just going back to speed, we talked about another fast wide receiver, Arian Smith out of Georgia. I really didn't see a lot of tape on him, which means that I'm not sure exactly how well he played at the Senior Bowl practices and at the game itself. I don't remember hearing his name at all, but what I did see is that he's a body catcher. And when the ball came at him, all you hear is thud, because it would hit him right in the chest. And he did have a slight frame, which is a little concerning for me too. So there's a reason why he's speedy, is just I don't think he's got a lot of meat on the bone.
Yeah, I mean, we saw another body catcher do great things in the NFL, and that's Brian Thomas Jr. I saw him catch a lot of body balls in college, and that was my big dig on him, is why I thought I didn't think he would work out as well as he has, is because he let that ball get into him. But
he was at least a big name.
He was at least a big name, yeah.
Before the combine.
Yeah, and not hearing a lot of stuff come out of him about in the Senior Bowl is kind of a big red flag there, just the fact that he wasn't able to get it done. And I know, man, I'm going to feel so bad after I do on all these quarterbacks. But I know the quarterbacks weren't great, but you should at least hear some names that they were getting targets. That's the big thing. Are they getting the target? Sure, if the target is terrible because the quarterback is no good, but you're at least getting open enough for the quarterback to want to throw you the ball. And, if you're not even hearing their name get targets, that's usually no bueno.
Yeah, we touched a little bit on Tai Felton. It's Tai. And he showed that he had a contested catch. He was the one that had the reception touchdown from RJ Harvey. He appeared to be shifty while running a go route. But again, I'm going to have to start looking a little bit more at some of the tape in regards to Tai Felton. I really don't have a lot other than what I just told you. Apparently Colten doesn't.
I've got nothing on him. So
yeah. And again, this wide receiver class is not very, very top heavy. I think you said it pretty well. A lot of wide receiver 2s, 3s, 4s, and beyond in this class. A couple of names that I'm going to be touching on here next are going to be some that, really started to elevate their draft stock. one of which is Jalen Knoll, wide receiver out of Iowa State. He made like a tough sideline catch in one of the practices, one that stands out from the Senior Bowl. And he could play anywhere on the field. And he was elusive. He was quick. He had sure hands. And, when I'm looking for wide receivers, I especially like to know, like, what kind of routes can they run? Are they just a one-trick pony? Or can they do all the different routes that are available? And that's where, we can start to see that perception and see the different route runnings and things like that. I love to dive more into as that content comes out.
Yeah, seeing the wide receiver have a diverse route tree is definitely key. And I have seen his name pop up quite a bit throughout this week on Twitter. Won't call it X. On Twitter, just and seeing names like that pop up at the wide receiver core and seeing them kind of dominate here is, like I said, we can't stress it enough. Keep an eye on these guys that can dominate at the Senior Bowl.
Tez Johnson, Oregon wide receiver, he was deemed unguardable against these elite defensive backs at the Reese's Senior Bowl. He had great separation, but Colten, he's only 5'9", 156 pounds. And you know who that reminds me of?
Me.
Tank Dell.
I was going to say
was deemed there was no defensive backs that really wanted to guard him because he was unguardable at the Senior Bowl just a couple years ago. And now here we are with a clone of Tank Dell and Tez Johnson. And so obviously Tank Dell has got to be a comp for this guy. He showed great speed. He was breaking ankles out there, Colten. And, and here's what's interesting. He has a connection with Bo Nix. Bo Nix was like a brother to him. The Nix family actually took him in, and he played with him in high school and then again in college. So my question to you is, do you see a guy in a Tank Dell-esque player going to the Broncos with a 20.64 miles per hour speed quick?
Yeah, I mean, I know I said earlier that we got to give these undersized guys a shot, and they can have a year like Tank Dell where they play well and then they get injured, and then they get figured out and they can't come back from said injury, and then they are too small. So there is a point where undersized is okay and the explosive is okay, and then there's a point where it's just too small. I was afraid of Tank Dell when he came out for the exact reasons that we're seeing now. I mean, he blew up his first year because people didn't really know what to think about him. Then he gets hurt, and then he comes back from this injury for this year and just couldn't do anything. I think because people figured out that they could just toss him around like he was a little rag doll. And once they figured that out, I mean, it was unfortunately kind of game over, and you don't have anything else but that shiftiness and speed to rely on. They can't use their body or fight people off. So there is a point where you get a person that is my size out there on the field, and I know I'm losing every time because of that. So I will unfortunately be probably more turned off to this unless he really starts falling, because people are thinking the same thing as me, is because, yeah, you might have an outlier season or a couple of games where he gets shifty and gets open, but I think eventually they'll just figure it out and realize, hey, I can just bully this guy into whatever I want.
But if you drafted Tank Dell in your rookie drafts at the end of the third, fourth, maybe got him off the waivers, and you had an asset that accumulated the value that Tank Dell had perceived to have during that first year, like, whoa, you could have sold him for a boatload. And so this is still a guy I'm still going to have my ears open to. But as you said, like, Tank Dell is not a player that I was drafting. I didn't have him anywhere. And I made the mistake this year of actually drafting him in my redraft league. And guess what? I didn't do anything this year because he was one of the players that, was injured. I'd play him because, hey, he looks like he's the only guy out there. Still did nothing.
Yeah, they can just, I mean, there's a point where too small is a word in the NFL, and that's when they can just get bullied.
Okay. Three more wide receivers here, Colten. Jaden Higgins, wide receiver, Iowa State. He has a big frame. He's 6'5". He showed a lot of physicality at the Senior Bowl practices. And, he may be a day 2 pick per Daniel Jeremiah, which I thought was interesting. So looking at second round, third round of the NFL draft, again, this is a really like small list of wide receivers that show interest. So maybe some of these wide receivers will get pushed up a little bit for some wide receiver needy teams. That's my thought when I heard Daniel Jeremiah coming up with that. But he had 65 first downs, which was second most in the FBS. 9 touchdowns this year with 6 in the red zone. And so he did show that physicality, and he showed the playmaking ability that some of these teams might be looking for.
Yeah, some of those, we talked about sometimes too small is too small, and sometimes too big is also a kind of a knock. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of wide receivers that are 6'5". I mean, we're starting to look more at like tight end territory here with how big. I mean, we saw the guy, I can't quite remember his name, but he went to the Eagles last year because he's like 6'6", 6'7".
Johnny?
Yeah, Johnny, thank you. We saw him go there and not be able to do much because once you start getting too big of a frame, it just kind of gets weird and wonky. So, I mean, you got Drake London, and then you also have Tet McMillan this year, who are those taller, big frames. I think you have to be a very specific type of wide receiver in order to get it done with that big of a frame in the NFL here. And, I haven't watched much or know much about this guy. But just hearing that makes me kind of, you got to be very specific type in order to make it work in the NFL with that big frame.
Well, and with Johnny Wilson, I think he was one of the top, like, tallest wide receivers that actually participated in the combine ever. And he had a 6'6" frame, and there was a lot of people thinking that he was going to convert to tight end, and which he still may, but he's only 230 pounds with that huge frame.
Just put on a wet jersey, add a couple pounds there.
Yeah. Jack Beck, TCU wide receiver, 6'1", 214 pounds, had a nice stronger frame, better BMI. But it sounded like he lost his brother in New Orleans, unfortunately, which, they brought that up a few times during the Senior Bowl practice, and you hate to hear it. But, unfortunately, we're in a time in our world that it's just a really unsettling time where anything can happen. But Jack Beck isn't just falling back just because he lost a family member, not any just family member, he lost his brother. And so he was fighting out there. It's only been within the last month that this all happened. And so I can only imagine the emotions and like where his mindset could be. But he showed a lot out there during the practices. And he started at LSU as the tight end, and then he transferred to TCU as a wide receiver. And so we were just talking about like a wide receiver converting to tight end. This was a great segment. Now we're going from a tight end to a wide receiver. But no one could cover him. He also does special teams, so you might want to make a side note of that there, Colten. But Field Yates thinks he's going to be a day 1 or 2 pick. So in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft, he looked like he was going to be more of a possession receiver, strong hands, red zone target. He had a touchdown catch in the Senior Bowl, and he also had a huge catch from Dart for 39 yards in the Senior Bowl also. And so he stood out not only in the practices, but also in the game.
Yeah, I mean, he is jacked too. I mean, he is a big, muscular kid. Like he's a big boy, so it's definitely one to keep an eye on there as he's climbing his way up the draft boards here. And yeah, he had a clutch walk-off touchdown, won the game for him there at the very end. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely an interesting guy. Terrible and story to hear about the New Orleans attack, that it was his brother involved. But you're right, it was a big emotional thing for him. But, I think he's using it to just kind of climb up that ladder and using it as fuel to help keep him going through it all. I mean, it's a tough situation, but looked good. I did see some video on him throughout the week, and yeah, he looked like he was just kind of dominating out there, has sure hands, and is able to make some pretty good catches and run some crisp routes. So, we've seen a lot of guys that got that muscle packed onto them that are able to do that, like DK Metcalf. A lot of people were looking down upon him during when he was coming out, and we've seen that these stronger wide receivers are really able to get it done. And, I do like that about him a lot.
Yeah, I'll be interested to know what his route tree is when that information comes out. but he's definitely a name that I'm going to be at least looking at if I need wide receivers on any of my teams. You probably don't have to reach for him. I don't think there's a lot of people that know a lot about Jack Beck unless they were really tuned in to either this network, Fantasy Football Healers, and watching us and looking at our content at FF Healers and at FF Captain 22 on Twitter X, or, maybe they're a TCU fan. Go Horned Frogs. Or Horned Toads. They're the Horned Toads, aren't they?
I think it's
Or Horned Frogs. Is it Horned Frogs?
I don't know. TCU.
Dang it. Xavier Restrepo is another Miami wide receiver, so maybe you have some footage that you've seen from him when you were looking at some of the quarterbacks. But he was looking like more of a slot receiver. He's small, but he's a good route runner. And when Miami needed a big play, he was the guy they looked at. He had 200 receptions, 2,844 yards in his career with Miami, which was both team firsts. And he has kind of I've heard shades of Amon-Ra from Field Yates, which I find very interesting. And he plays bigger than his size. He had one drop all season in 2024, which is another fascinating stat. He was a fifth-year player, which is kind of one of those at least yellow flags for me. He was there for 5 years. I usually like players that are, coming out a little bit earlier, but now with the NIL deals, I think that's going to become more common because they can make a lot of money now. 93% in separation scores and 89% single coverage scores. So this guy can get open.
Yeah. Horned Frogs, by the way.
Horned Frogs. I was right the first time.
Horned Frogs. But yeah, I broke down. I finished Cam. Well, not finished. I still have one game I want to watch on Cam Ward. I'm at 4 with him. So haven't quite completed it, but I've seen a lot out of him. And yeah, he is a wide receiver that I am in the process of determining, with these, I might have to watch a couple of extra games, but I'm in the process of trying to determine, with Cam Ward, was it this wide receiver and his tight end that we liked earlier, the ones that made him look good? And once we get into our more video analysis and breakdowns and deep dive into the rookie class, we'll kind of get into it a little bit more. But man, he looked good. He made some awesome catches, and there were some throws that I was like, if Cam Ward would have thrown it a little bit better, he could have had some more yardage, but he was able to stop on a dime and make that catch. And he did. He made some impressive catches. He got open a lot. And I mean, he was definitely the go-to guy for Cam Ward there in Miami. So it is definitely interesting to kind of get into the footage. And once I see what he does, with his own route tree and watching specifically just him, I'll be more interested into it. But as I was breaking down that Cam Ward film, it was his name popping up a lot there.
That's some of my concerns with Shadir Sanders also, is that he had a lot of playmakers. Travis Hunter might be one of the best, all-around players that the NFL has seen ever. And, he can play both offense and defense. And then you've got, Wester they had as a wide receiver, and they had Shepard as a wide receiver there with Colorado. And so, were these guys what made Shadir, or did they all kind of play together? That was kind of the question mark for Michael Penix coming out also, was that he had 3 really good receivers and people had questions on Penix.
Yeah, it's definitely the question to kind of be asking right now, especially, as we're getting into these quarterbacks and the quarterback needy teams. It depends on where are they going. Are they going to have the weapons? We've seen Brock Purdy be successful with his weapons and not as successful without his weapons. So, a lot depends on where these guys are landing. And we'll get into it more once we start deep diving, but it was definitely a name that kept popping up as I was watching that film.
Which is a great transition to us going to the quarterbacks. And so I also, like I said, I watched some content on the Senior Bowl practices from Field Yates and then also with Mel Kiper. And so they provided some of their quarterback rankings. I'll start with Field Yates's because he only has the top 5, while Mel Kiper has top 10. So Field Yates had Ward as number 1, Sanders is number 2, Dart is number 3, Milroe, and then Howard. While Mel Kiper had actually reversed. He had Sanders at number 1, Ward at number 2, Dart at number 3, Milroe at number 4, and instead of Howard, he had Kyle McCord at number 5, Will Howard at number 6, Quinn Ewers at number 7, Dylan Gabriel at number 8, Curtis Rourke, who I've never heard of, at number 9, and Tyler Scholl at number 10. And so I think we need to start maybe with Jackson Dart, Ole Miss. Thank you, Colten.
You're welcome.
He rolled out with, some high out passes, overthrowing the ball. He was top 2 thrower in his class. He was top 5 in FBS with yards and QBR. He's more of a pocket passer. Every podcast I keep listening to, they are just hyping this man up. And what I saw at the Senior Bowl practices is I didn't see it.
I have not gotten into his footage yet. He is my next quarterback on my list to really deep dive into. But I do know he has been building a lot of hype and a lot of people have been loving. But what I saw, out of the X footage for the Senior Bowl practices, I really just do not like this quarterback class at all, man. It's going to be really hard for me to even, if some of these guys start falling, for me to even want to take them. And we'll get into it more, just giving everyone teases and stuff for what's to come. But that is just my broad blanket statement as of right now, is I do not like this quarterback class. The top 3 guys, with everybody, has been typically Sanders, Ward, Dart, and then Milroe typically at that 4. So I've broken down 3 of those 4, and right now I'm not happy. I'm not happy at all. And I know a lot of those guys aren't going to be doing the combine to try to improve their stock, because I think it'll just decrease their stock. So it's going to be interesting to see the landing spot and everything. But yeah, what I saw out of Jackson Dart and just the short video footage I got on X, Twitter, dang it, I said it, giving in. But yeah, it wasn't there.
I've been wanting to plant my feet down to figure out who the number 3 quarterback is. And I was thinking that maybe Milroe would be the guy, just because of his rushing upside. And I can't say that I saw that, especially at the Senior Bowl games. But what I can tell you is I keep hearing comps of Anthony Richardson, but a better thrower of the football and a better runner with much more experience. He did have 20 rushing touchdowns. He had 45 big-time throw rate since 2023, which is 8th among FBS quarterbacks. He had less than 3% takeaway rate. He's a dual threat. They're comping him to have a rocket arm, but accuracy problems. And that's what we've seen also when you have a running quarterback with Anthony Richardson, is he had accuracy problems. And you had a guy that was only throwing the ball 12 to 15 times a game. And so there was and they started to get into a little bit of debate here about how Josh Allen had some of these same concerns coming out, but Josh Allen could still throw the ball. But he could be a steal in the second round, in Superflex leagues, ? I don't know. I wasn't as impressed and again, this was a guy that I wanted to be impressed with at the Senior Bowl, and I was left wanting more.
I'm going to leave it at just his Senior Bowl participation here, and what I saw out of his Senior Bowl participation. I won't do my deep dive yet. We'll do that when we go into our rookie deep dive and quarterbacks and everything. But out of his Senior Bowl footage, garbage. Absolute. He is a single threat quarterback, and that is he can run the ball. He is a great runner. And when you said earlier,
Joe Webb,
you were talking about running back, and I was like, I thought you were about to come out and say that Jalen Milroe was the other running back that threw a touchdown, but I was like, I don't know if Milroe did throw a touchdown, but I thought you were going to say that, and I was like, because he's a running back, man.
Milroe did nothing in the Senior Bowl game.
Yeah, terrible. He looked.
He didn't throw for a touchdown.
No, because I don't think he could throw the ball. I mean, I know the defense was hard. It was a tough defense, and it's going to look like it's going to be a good defensive class. But that's what you're going to be facing in the NFL. I mean, you're going to be facing good defenses. You're not going to be facing these crappier defenses. So we got a taste of what his career is going to be, I think, out of the Senior Bowl there. I don't see it. I'm not going to give the full deep dive, but that is the taste of what I kind of have written down on my deep dive. As his Senior Bowl kind of tells it all.
You were saying about, I don't know if I want to reach on any of these quarterbacks, period, really. There was a guy that really impressed me at the Senior Bowl practices at the quarterback position. And it surprised me because I didn't think that I was going to like this guy at all, just based on like some of the size. And, I generally don't like left-handed quarterbacks because that it throws off the whole like route running scheme. But Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback out of Oregon, he's got a small frame, which is where my concern is, 5'10", 202 pounds. He was the 2024 Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. He did throw on the right side, and he did deliver the ball well, which that was one of my concerns. Being a left-handed quarterback, rolling to the right is really challenging to do. But he was able to at least show that at practice and show that even in the Senior Bowl. He runs the offense well. He transferred to different schools to challenge himself instead of going down to like lower quality teams or colleges to look well. He was trying to challenge himself and become a better quarterback. And we saw that with Oregon this year, making the playoffs. They didn't play that well in the playoff game, but he did throw for 155 passing touchdowns total in his career, which is tied most in FBS history. 73% completion rate, third in FBS, and Mel Kiper has him currently at number 8 as a quarterback prospect for this year. I'm starting to really move Dylan Gabriel up my board, and as of right now, like he's showing himself better, in my opinion, than Milroe or Dart.
Yeah, we're finding out in this day and age of the NFL that all these teams are looking for their explosive athletic quarterback, the ones that can be a dual threat, the Jaden Daniels of the world. And we're finding it more and more that those guys are super hard to find. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't, but we're seeing these guys that are pure pocket passers, your Bo Nix, your Joe Burrows, guys like that are the ones that are kind of getting it done. I mean, I know Bo Nix got a lot done with his legs this year, and he is, kind of more of a dual threat. But the guys that can pass the ball is more important than the guys that can run the ball. I mean, Anthony Richardson is one heck of an athlete that can run the ball, but he can't pass it. So we're seeing him phase out. So the guys that are able to get the job done through the air are the guys that are going to be better for the NFL. And that's what we need to see out of these guys. And so, I mean, if you're able to make smooth passes and get the ball to the playmakers, you're going to have a successful career. We've seen Brock Purdy make a career out of it. He gets the ball to his playmakers. Gets it to them to let them do what they need to get done. And if you can do that, I think you'll have a successful career. We don't need the flashy guys. So if Dylan Gabriel can show that he is a good passer, I think a team will pick him up. And if he can get the job done well enough to get to playmakers, that's going to be good enough for me.
As of right now, I think Dylan Gabriel, again, quarterback out of Oregon, I think he's a poor man's Baker Mayfield.
I love Baker. Don't give me that comp.
I think you're going to get excited about him once you watch some of his tape. I think there's some excitement that can be had there with Dylan Gabriel. And so I think if you're in Superflex leagues, he's a guy right now, like people aren't talking about. You're going to hear it here first with the Fantasy Football Healers program. And so stay tuned. Got a couple other guys that are just guys at the quarterback position, one of which is Seth Hennigan, Memphis quarterback at the Senior Bowl. He was one of 2 quarterbacks that actually started and finished the program at the same school. Milroe was the other. But Colten, when I'm watching the tape, the ball was literally unraveling while he was throwing the ball at the practice.
Is that
exciting? Not exciting.
Oh,
not
okay.
Exciting. It was unraveling. It was not a tight spiral like you'd want. Tyler Show, quarterback out of Louisville. Remember, Mel Kiper had him as his number 10 overall. He threw for 3,195 yards and 23 touchdowns, and then he did transfer from Texas Tech in 2024. Injuries were his problem early in his career. He holds on the ball too long is some of the content that I was starting to come up with. He did look like he had a big arm and he could rip the ball while he was at Louisville. But what I thought was interesting about this guy is that he's been in school for a long time. He has 4 college degrees. That's how long he's been in college. He has 4 college degrees. He's got a political science major, criminal justice major, master's at Texas Tech, and business at Texas Tech. And basically, Colten, he was majoring in football.
Man, he is just his major is being a student. My goodness, that is his career. He is a career student. Goodness gracious. I thought I went to school for a long time.
I hope that they helped cover some of his bills from college tuition.
Oh,
the NIL deals probably helped to that, I would guess.
I'm sure he's gotten plenty.
The last guy I wanted to talk about, only because just a little bit of interesting background with him. Taylor, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, so bear with me here. Taylor Elgersom, quarterback out of Ontario University. Guess what, Colten? Another guy that holds onto the ball too long. He's got a slow internal clock, but this is the first time playing American football when he was at the Senior Bowl. And I think he's the first Canadian quarterback that's ever played in the Senior Bowl. The difference between Canadian football and American football, which I didn't know, and this is why I'm bringing him up. We have 11-man defenses, while I guess in Canada they have a 12-man football. So I just thought that was interesting. But he did win the Canadian Heisman 2 years in a row.
Well, the Canadian Football League is going to love him.
Colten, that's pretty much all the content that I had for the Senior Bowl. They did have the Shrine Bowl this past week, and I got to say, there's only one player that sticks out in my mind here, and that's the Arizona running back, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. And he broke off a ton of big runs for the East. He jump cutted with good vision, burst on the run, later took a pitch and ran into the end zone. He had 6 rushes for 61 yards and a touchdown, but that's not all. He also scored another touchdown for 74 yards by halftime and 2 touchdowns. In the second half, they just continued to give him the ball. He made a nice spin move and makes a few defenders miss. He's got speed. He was shifty, elusive. This is a running back that I can take a little bit of insight going forward, going towards the combine. I want to know a little bit more about Mr. Merritt.
Absolutely. And you are forgetting that he also came from the New Mexico Lobos as well. You know, got to represent. He wore both logos on his decal, just because, you know, that New Mexico Lobos, they're not a big time school. So he transferred to Arizona probably to get a little more experience and to get a little more coverage on him. But yeah, I mean, he looked awesome. He looked phenomenal. This is a guy that I didn't really know a whole lot about and probably wasn't going to care to watch his film all that much. And he made me interested to get into him. He's on my list now to really do that deep dive into. So that's one way to absolutely increase your draft stock, is to go and do something like that at one of these bowls. And we said it before, you know, these are the guys that it makes their name interesting to get the coverage on them. So good for him to get that up there, and go Lobos.
He showed out, and that's why I've got him down as a guy I want to just keep following and see, you know, where does it develop? You know, he's probably going to be a day 3 pick, I still think, for the NFL draft if he gets drafted. But, you know, what happens if he just even goes undrafted and finds himself on a roster with a very shallow running back depth chart? He could be a guy that could ascend quick, and you'll be the first person to actually know who the heck he is, for one. And then number 2, you probably have him on your taxi squad.
I thought you were going to say the Dallas Cowboys again. I thought you were going to do it.
Not yet. Not yet. But I did want to thank you all for, again, continuing to follow us. If you like our program, please like and subscribe. Again, you can find us on YouTube by searching FF Healers. You can search for us at FF Healers on Twitter X. You can find Colten at FF Captain 22 on Twitter X. We appreciate you guys for listening to us and continue to stay tuned for our off-season content. We're going to be continue to dive deep into these rookies, and we're only a couple weeks away from the NFL Combine.
Getting to exciting times, man. I'm getting pumped for it.
But with that, again, thank you all for listening, and we are the Fantasy Football Healers, and we're out.
Salud.